Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the inaugural Tourism Data Leadership Conference. My name is Fiona Lowe, and I'm very happy to be your MC today. Today's conference brings together industry members to share best practices in using tourism data and to encourage and advocate the use of tourism data for decision making, innovation, and business growth. It's good to see about 200 of you online today. Now, a couple of administrative details to get out of the way. The program will last for about 2 hours, so please get comfortable, get some food and drinks if you would like to. You can navigate the platform by clicking on the tabs above to toggle between the live video, the program for today, and the presenter's profile and the event survey. On the right side of the screen, you will see a chat function where you can add comments and ask questions along the way. This session is recorded, and the link to review the recording will be shared with you after the event. At the same time, we will be sharing the presentation slides and materials with you, so please feel free to participate actively. For a better viewing experience, you may choose to put the live video in full screen mode. Now, without further ado, I'd like to invite Mr. Keith Tan, Chief Executive, Singapore Tourism Board, to give his welcome address. Mr. Keith Tan, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today at the Tourism Data Leadership Conference. Now, it has been more than a year since the COVID-19 pandemic began. We have come a long way since then by safely reopening tourism establishments, tapping into domestic demand, conducting many different pilots, and opening up green lanes for travelers to enter Singapore. But STB's focus cannot just be short-term. Yes, we will do everything we can to help tourism businesses cope with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we must also keep an eye towards the future. I'm very glad that many tourism enterprises are doing the same thing by looking out for opportunities that exist even now. Many are making full use of this period to gear themselves up to uncover and seize opportunities for tourism recovery. Our industry can capitalize on these opportunities in two ways. First, companies that want to emerge stronger from this crisis must press on with technology transformation and upskilling efforts in order to stay relevant in the long run and not get left behind. COVID-19 has caused many shifts in consumer demands and behavior and will continue to do so. Our industry must adapt in order to survive and thrive in the new normal. It is therefore crucial to build our tech, digital, and data capabilities. We need to equip ourselves with relevant data and actionable insights and be able to test bed and scale new ideas quickly. STB's new Chief Technology Officer, Wong Ming Fai, will share more how STB can partner and support you in your technology transformation journey. Secondly, it is crucial for all of us to compete together as an ecosystem. When the world is ready to travel again, Singapore must decisively capture growth as it returns, market by market, segment by segment. As a destination, we must position ourselves at the top of our visitors' minds and be able to deliver an enjoyable and safe visitor experience that meets their needs. Data analytics is a prime opportunity for us to compete together. The collective use of tourism data will help strengthen our industry by breaking down silos of data. Companies that form data alliances will be able to generate new insights and business opportunities that they might not have been able to derive on their own. Being in the same line of business does not mean you must be competitors and cannot be partners. I was heartened to hear that participants in our data analytics shift program, DASH, exchange learnings from their own past data projects and also shared tips on how to help each other out. This is definitely in the right direction of co-opetition or cooperative competition. You will hear more about DASH later in this conference. I encourage all of you to be open about sharing data, to exchange ideas, and to form win-win partnerships with each other. Shorten the innovation cycle, share what has worked and what didn't, collaborate and spark new ideas for game changers, cooperate and compete as an ecosystem. Because in the years ahead, our true competition is with other destinations, not amongst ourselves. To conclude, I urge all our industry leaders here today to continuously look for ways to transform your companies to become more proficient at using data and to collaborate together for collective benefits. We've invited a few stakeholders and practitioners here today to share their data transformation journey and experiences to start this conversation. I hope this inspires more of us to do business not just differently, but to do things better. Thank you.
To invite Mr. Wong Ming Fai, Chief Technology Officer, Singapore Tourism Board, for his opening remarks. Mr. Wong Ming Fai, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ming Fai, Chief Technology Officer of Singapore Tourism Board. This is probably the first time you're seeing me. I was the Chief Information Officer at Enterprise Singapore prior to joining STB. I'm now leading the Technology Transformation Group, and I see many opportunities for greater use of data for Singapore tourism. As such, I'm excited to partner and work with all of you to transform Singapore's tourism industry. Technology has already been a key area of focus for us pre-COVID, but the pandemic has accelerated the need for us to transform in order to adapt to the new operating environment and changing consumer demands. STB has developed a rich set of tools and solutions that you can tap into for your transformation initiatives. I hope you won't miss out on them. Let me briefly share with you using our three-step framework of learn, test, build. For the first step, we need to learn in order to know how we can improve. STB launched the Tourism Transformation Index, or TXI in short. This is a self-diagnostic tool for companies to assess their strengths, identify areas of opportunity, and provide recommendations on the next steps to take in their digital transformation journey. We also launched STB Data College in December for industry stakeholders to leverage e-learning to build data capabilities of their employees. Secondly, with the necessary knowledge and tools, you can then test new ways of doing things to improve your business. The Singapore Tourism Accelerator Program scouts internationally for startups with innovative solutions for tourism. You can test these innovative solutions through pilots with these startups. For the first 3 cohorts, we received more than 500 applications from over 40 countries, which we screened and filtered down to 26 supported startups. The Data Analytics Shift program that Keith mentioned earlier help you to use data more effectively in your business. In this program, each company form a team, and this team will implement a data project for the company, guided by you as a management level sponsor. Participating companies are also supported by STB-appointed industry mentors and targeted training conducted by NTU. Participants in our first 2 runs have found the DASH programs instrumental in transforming their business and at the same time building their capabilities in data. We have an upcoming run of this program from April with limited vacancies remaining. So do indicate your interest in a survey form later if you're interested to participate and receive more information. Lastly, to help you build a stronger company and industry, STB has created a suite of smart services that your business can tap into for data and shared content, so as to build new products and services or make better business decisions. One such service is the Tourism Information and Services Hub, or TIH in short. It's an integrated, open platform which businesses can use to distribute their travel-related content and services. and at the same time access other companies' travel-related content and services. Another smart service is the Singapore Tourism Analytics Network, or STAN, where you can access data such as tourism statistics and visualizations. So for example, visitor arrival numbers. We have recently launched new data domains and features in STAN, and will continue doing so in the future. I've just shared 6 of our initiatives that you can benefit from for your transformation efforts. If you would like to find out more, we will be sharing the reference materials after today's event. Today's conference is yet another of our initiatives to build the data capabilities of the tourism industry. The Tourism Data Leadership Conference brings together tourism leaders to discuss the use of data for business strategies, innovation, and growth. Over the course of the conference, we hope that each of you can learn from one another, exchange best practices, and generate new ideas about how tourism industry can better use data. The theme of this year's edition is harnessing the power of data for tourism recovery. It is in such shifting times that we need data more than ever to help us keep in touch with what's going on around us and to respond more quickly to evolving needs. Starting today, STB will be building up a community of like-minded data practitioners in the tourism industry. We welcome sharing from across our industry as each of you makes progress in your data transformation. So please reach out to us if you would like to share. I also like to thank our presenters, Malti, Malcolm, Kelly, David, Paul, and Ian for embracing the spirit of open sharing and for taking the time to be here in person at the recording studio today. I look forward to the interesting presentations and a lively panel discussion later that will be moderated by Paul. Do participate actively by sharing your views and questions. I hope all of you will have many useful takeaways from the conference and come away inspired to lead your companies to become even more data-driven. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Malti Jess, Business Manager and Regional Product Lead, Travel Vertical Search APAC, Google Asia Pacific Limited. His work focuses on collaborating with travel advertising partners across APAC, as well as identifying and driving APAC-specific travel product needs. In his presentation, Travel Insights, Opportunities for Tourism Recovery, he will be sharing insights and trends you can use to adapt your business. He will also be introducing some tools you can use to leverage data analytics for your business. Now, Malti will be taking 1 to 2 questions right after his presentation, so if you have any burning questions, please feel free to share them into the chat box, and he will take it right after his presentation. So please join me to welcome Mr. Malti Jess.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you for paying attention to my presentation today. I'm going to take you now through an exciting journey of data. Why is data exciting? Because data helps you to spot trends early on. Like, take this example here. A year ago, the Singapore government announced new travel rules. As a result of these new travel rules, we saw on Google the search demand for the term staycation spike by 150% month on month. Now, this might not be an insight for you nowadays anymore, because this is the new norm, but certainly at that time, this was ahead of the curve. So today, I'm going to help you with 2 things. First, I'm going to take you through the current insights based on our Google data. Second, I'm going to introduce you to 3 tools that you can use to basically stay on top of these trends and do not need Google to tell you what the current trend is. With that being said, I have a very good news for all of you. Despite the global pandemic, we do see across the globe that there is a strong demand for travel, and that is also true for APAC. It is just that this demand is basically split into two categories. On the one, we have pent-up demand. Think of us sitting right now in Singapore. We wish we could travel, but we just have to wait. But then there is also the domestic travel, which presents the second opportunity and what we are likely and focusing on for the near future. Despite that, you have to also keep in mind that there are really a lot of travelers out there that want to travel. In fact, in our consumer surveys that we run monthly across APAC, we find that 1 in 2 of APAC consumers would love to travel and wants to travel right now. The question is, how can they travel? And this leads us, or it leads us driven by COVID-19, to segmenting countries in a new way and creating strategies around these. And let me take you through an example here. We in Google, we basically look at countries right now across APAC in 3 stages: the new normal, the transition, or lockdown. The new normal, as an example, Singapore, is where domestic travel is possible and allowed. However, this is not in all markets across APAC the case. You have some markets that are still in a transitioning stage where maybe some restricted travel within a state is possible, but not in the entire country. And then lastly, we still have some markets across the region where traveling is not possible at all because they're in lockdown. The important here is that if you look at the countries on the scale, this is very dynamic. And even right now, a country might be at a different stage than 2 weeks ago when we designed this slide. So this is another hint that it's extremely important to stay on top of the current trends. How are consumers' preference changing in this world? There are 3 trends that we do see come up. One already mentioned is travel demand is domestic. Second, there is a flight to practicality and safety. And third, there is a digital travel acceleration. Now let me take you through some statistics around those examples. Domestic travel really makes up the bulk of demand right now. And in fact, at this point, 1 in 4 of APAC consumers would love to travel domestically within the next 6 months. If you look at the motivation for this travel, it might be no surprise to you that the number 1 motivation is family getaways and not business travel, as it might have been the case before. So what does that mean to you? That means you have to catch the attention of those travelers. You have to adjust your messaging to really appeal to them and assure that you are on top of mind for the current family getaway domestic travelers. Another good question to ask is, what is important to travelers right now? In fact, we see that safety is the new brand and flexibility is the new loyalty. What do I mean by that? Despite price, the number 2 consideration for travelers among APAC right now is flexibility and cancellation when it comes to booking their next stay. In fact, in 8 out of 9 markets, the consumers caring right now more about cleanliness and hygiene measures than they do about loyalty programs and some points that they can collect. So this really means to you, you have to build health and in your value proposition. You have to build up on these emerging trends and by that capture this upcoming demand. Third, a very relevant question, how are our consumers booking right now? In order to answer that question, we actually looked at China and analyzed post-pandemic outbreak, how are consumer preferences changing towards booking. And what we see is a clear trend towards online bookings with online travel agency. That effect have more than doubled among Chinese consumers post-pandemic outbreak. And another factor why online presence is so relevant these days is that above 50% of the consumers in APAC have a booking window of less than 7 days in advance. So to summarize these insights for you, really provide the relevant information to the current travel audience out there. Make sure that your user interfaces are appealing and easy to use for the new digital consumer. And very important, launch safety programs so that you're appealing to the new demands of consumers. Now, this is a snapshot of how things are going on at the moment. I, of course, also want to put you some tools at hand that you can use to analyze how it's going to be moving forward. And in the following minutes, I'm going to introduce 3 tools to you. First, Google Trends. Second, Google Destinations Insight. And third, Hotel Insights with Google. Google Trends, you can think of this tool as the most general, broadest tool of all of these three. It is not travel specific. You can go from travel as a topic category down to specific search terms like your own brand and find out how demand on Google search has developed for this topic or term over time. An example is here on the slide in the upper right corner. Where you can see that the search interest for hotels in Singapore peaked in March 2020, and ever since then, never reached this peak again. So this goes in line with the staycation peak presented earlier. So while this tool is great at spotting general trends, many of you might want to know more about what is happening in travel specifically. This is where Google Destination Insights come in. It's a free-to-use tool available for everyone, and you can understand this tool as the most comprehensive tool that we currently have out there to spot current trends in travel. So what does this tool show you? Based on your configurations on origin and destination country, as well as travel demand sources such as accommodation or flights, you can find out how these demand patterns are changing over time and how they compare to the past. An example insight here again on the slide is that the demand for global accommodation by Singaporean users decreased more than 80% year over year in January 21. And that, of course, also makes sense if you think about that in January 2020, the global travel restrictions were not yet in place. But this tool helps you to go deeper. On the next layer, you can even check where are the top sources of demand going to. This is top destinations by search volume and the year-over-year change in query volume. As an example insight, you can see here that users in Singapore right now have the highest interest for accommodation in Kuala Lumpur and Bangkok, which is something to act upon fast once travel restrictions may lift. And lastly, this tool also helps you identify the sources of demand for your location. So in this case, we took Singapore as the destination country. And as you can see, currently, the highest demand for Singapore as a destination outside of Singapore is in Vietnam. I hope that this tool will help you identify how your demand patterns shift, but also be on top of demand recovery as soon as you might see it. So let's move to the third and last tool that I'm going to introduce to you today. It's called Hotel Insights, and you can think of it as the simplified version of the Destinations Insight tool, where you just have to do one simple thing. You just specify a location, and you get the interest and demand insights around this location. So here is an example. We picked Singapore again. And you could see that the search interest for Singapore was close to pre-COVID levels in December 2020, which is some good news that out there is still some upcoming demand for Singapore as a destination. Also, this tool does allow you to see the split between domestic and international interest. So here is an example. It also shows you that right now around 80% of the search interest for Singapore as a travel destination originates from Singapore. However, it also introduces the top inbound markets, similar to what the Destination Insights tool does. I hope that these tools will be of value to you to identify moving forward where your source of demand is coming from and be ready and on top of the curve once there is some uptake in demand. So let me take a step back and summing up today's session. What are really the key takeaways of what I've just spoken about? Number one, monitor and be current with the latest trend. This is so important as on a daily, even weekly basis, these trends can shift and change. And it is important that you yourself are on top of those. I have also linked the three tools that help you to stay on top of these trends on this slide. So I hope you will all be able to use this after today's session. Second, establish and improve a digital presence. We have seen a massive shift towards digital. So it is where the consumer is, and it's where you want to be to reach the consumer. Make sure you harness the power of data and infrastructure to personalize your message to the right users. And third, communicate extensively with clarity. The safety is the new brand. So differentiate your value proposition and be on top of that new branding. And with that, we believe that you will be ready for the new demand, and I hope you're gonna capture the upcoming curve ahead of us. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jess, for sharing the interesting insights with us. We're so happy to have you here with us today. How are you feeling?
Very good. I'm just sad I missed the audience, but it's great to know that the audience is out there.
This is a new norm, huh?
I guess it is.
Well, we do have quite a number, I think about 200 of the online audience with us. So I don't feel so alone today. But if I could, I'd like to take some of your time to answer some questions. All right,
Sure.
so earlier on, we did open up the chat box for any comments or questions that you have for our presenters today. So let's take one of it I'm seeing here. If I have further questions on the tools that you introduced to us earlier, who can I check with?
That's a great question. I wish I could say you could just all contact me and I'm going to explain those to you. But unfortunately, that is not part of my day-to-day job. So I have to direct you to the publicly available resources on these tools. As these tools are free to use, you'll be able to find plenty of information around those either on the website itself, but there are also some educational videos, for example, on YouTube, which I hope will help you to find the right answer.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. It's unfortunate that we can't come to you direct, but I'm sure that you will direct us to some very nice people that will answer our questions. Okay, so I do have another question for you. Would I be able to find the search interest for my organization by searching for the name? And is it possible to look into the demographics?
So the short answer is yes, especially with the Google Trends tool. You are able to look at your own brand, at your own search terms. So you will be able to find out how your brand is trending at the moment. And you are also able to break down certain, let's say, characteristics of who is searching for you. If demographics will always be possible, maybe not, but especially location and similar search interests. So you will be able to identify more insights about the audience that is looking for you.
Well, perfect. I see we have one more question coming in. Is that one more question? Yes. Are the APIs available?
APIs to get the data. Yeah, no, we're getting very technical. I like that. So there are no APIs available for these three introduced tools yet. I think that's a great feedback to actually take with me. But there are APIs available for other kind of data that you might be able to access when you are a customer of Google. But for the three presented tools, no API access yet.
Well, thank you so much for your sharing with us, Mr. Jess. And we look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So next, we'd like to invite Mr. Malcolm Leong, Head Revenue Management and Distribution Strategy, Far East Hospitality Management. In 2015, Mr. Leong spearheaded the formation of the Data Science and Analytics team in Far East Hospitality. And currently, he oversees the analytics, revenue management, and digital marketing functions. In his presentation today, The Journey of Data Transformation, he will be sharing Far East Hospitality's data transformation journey and how they applied these learnings to their latest business projects. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions for Mr. Leong, same thing, you know the drill. Drop your questions into the chat box, and Mr. Leong will take them during the panel discussion later. Please join me to welcome Mr. Malcolm Leong.
Thank you. So far, East Hospitality has been on this journey of data analytics for not too long, since 2015. So if we are a kid born in 2015, actually we haven't gone to primary school yet. But we had a fair share of our knots in life, and therefore I will share our data transformation journey, which looks like this picture over here. Looks extremely bleak, but I'm actually lying to you. There are a lot of dark clouds out there, and today I want to be very honest with you and share all the difficulties, the tips that we have, so that you don't make the same mistakes as we do, and maybe we can have more learnings together. Now, without much doubt, obviously one of the things that we really need to do is obviously explore. But to be honest, back at the time of 2015, there were very little analytics about tourism, and therefore we actually did something which is to explore cross industries. We explore analytics in manufacturing, we explore analytics in banking and finance, and I think that turned out to be quite a blessing in disguise, because of that exploration across industries, we really opened our minds as to what kind of analytics are really out there in the market. Now, the other thing I will also encourage you to do is also not to just focus on your area. For example, I'm in sales and marketing, and therefore there's a tendency to focus on analytics on sales and marketing, but really explore analytics across departments. For example, analytics in human resource, analytics in finance, and that will give you quite a good idea of what analytics is truly capable of. Now, the other thing, once you get all these ideas, is really to sort of create some framework. We brought back the ideas, and we really wanted to kind of understand what we wanted from our analytics and what we did not want. Now, it was easier to come up with what we did not want. We did not want analytics to be purely reporting. Therefore, analytics should not be, so I repeat, it should not be purely, for example, creating dashboards. It cannot be purely about visualizations. It must be more than that. Now, the other thing also is it should not be costly. And this was, I think, one of our initial mistakes that we made early on in our journey. There's a very high tendency for any organization when they start their journey on analytics is to focus on the tools. For example, you start thinking, should I buy Tableau? Should I buy Power BI? And so on and so forth. So the analogy is this. It's almost like before you learn to drive, you start thinking about buying a Mercedes. So instead of thinking about the tools, think about your approach. Now, what do I mean by approach? Approach means what we really wanted from the analytics itself. We wanted, obviously, buy-in from two groups of people, obviously one from the management and the second from the users. Now, when we present our case to the management, we did not just present one or two cases. We present a 5-year vision, and which is why I remember 2015 quite well, because I presented a 2020 vision to our management. So a 5-year vision really is a series of proof of concepts, a series of ideas that you want. It gives you a vision of what you really wanted to achieve. But you also want the users to have the buy-in. So when users have the buy-in, it must be actionable to them. So it is not just about data, insights, or prediction. It is about the strategy and tactics that can arise from these insights and prediction. And the last thing that we wanted is to measure whether those strategies and tactics work or not. So maybe I'll give a very simple illustration. I think to many hoteliers, they probably can understand this better. And as I understand, there are different audiences here. There are people from the travel agents, there are people from the mines. So I'll give you a context first. In a hotel, we like to do this report. It's called the daily pickup report. What's the daily pickup report? It tells you about the business that you pick up yesterday. So what we did not want is to change a daily pickup report to a chart or visualization or just a dashboard. Because when you think about it, how do you justify this project? What you have monetized is actually nothing. You just have some cost savings because you have saved some automation, true automation of the report. What we really wanted is this. If you do the pickup report, there's a reason why you're doing a pickup report. Why are you doing a pickup report? Because you wanted to find out whether your promotions are working, whether you sold a lot of groups, so on and so forth. There's a reason and there's a logic when you look at your pickup report. So if I can even cut off the visualizations and go straight to alerts and recommendations, that monetization is significantly more because I monetize both on the revenue side and the cost side. Now, this is the hard truths because everybody is going to tell you all the nice things about analytics. I'm going to tell you the not so nice things about analytics. And the first thing, obviously, is about data. And data has a problem from a collection perspective and an extraction perspective. So without that, actually, you cannot even start your project. Now, I listed a couple of points here about consistency and quality and security. I think those are good problems. That means you have already extracted it, but now you have to kind of clean it up. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, how am I going to extract it? So Malte presented just now, and someone asked about API, which happened to be my team member. And that's the key question that we have to ask ourselves all the time. Is there API? Is there SFTP? How are we going to extract it? So every time you meet a vendor, you're going to ask the same question. How am I going to extract that data out? And the next question is it for free? Better is for free. The second hard truth is, if you're not doing a data visualization project, but you do a data analytics project, that you're really trying to extract out strategy and insights, very likely you're going to have more misses than hits. Why? Because there are possibilities of wrong hypotheses you might have come up with answer where actually the data doesn't actually solve your problem. So my tip here is don't go full on the project. Go small, prototype, do some proof of concepts. By doing so, it will not waste your time of extracting significant amounts of data and a lot of your time. Now, the third hard truth is actually a lot of the earlier problems can somewhat be solved technically. But the truth is, in our industry, we need people. We need people to execute. We are in the service industry. And operationalizing the strategy and tactics is going to take you most of the time. So what you're going to encounter is organizational resistance, departmental resistance, capabilities issues. They might not understand what you're doing. Therefore, my tip here is, firstly, leadership. At the CEO level, at the general manager level, that really helps. Communicating that data correctly to your audience. Sometimes, again, it is not necessarily to show graphs and charts and models to your audience. Just show the outcome. Now, lastly, one of the hard truths is talent, which affects your scalability. Now, talent, you can decide to do the project yourself. You can decide to do the project totally outsourced. Which one should you go? Now, if you do it in-house, you're going to face the problem of attracting talent. If you do it outside, you're going to have a problem of very costly engagement. Now, what we found out on ourselves is actually a good hybrid. You have a good team members who can understand your problem, have a good statistical background, be able to translate that problem to a vendor that does the coding for you. So a hybrid probably is a better solution. But I would also like to caution many, because you might get overly excited about analytics and create projects that are unnecessary. So for example, people thinking about recreating a revenue management system, I would suggest take a look outside. There might actually be solutions out there already for you. Don't do it all by yourself. Now I'm going to apply all this into one of the latest business cases that we did, actually in conjunction with Singapore Tourism Board and KPMG. And it is about understanding and predicting customer profitability. Now, this project is interesting because it monetizes data both ways, trying to increase your revenue, trying to decrease the associated cost of finding those customers. Now, we had to ask the difficult questions. What are my good customers? And data analytics really hones your logic into identifying the business case properly. So if you ask your customers, are you my good customer? They probably say, yes, you're my good customer. But is that so? The truth is every customer has different attributes. Some give you a lot of revenue. Some give you a lot of reviews or good reviews. Some give you repeat business. And it actually may be a combination of attributes. The person who write good review might not actually give you a lot of revenue, for example. And therefore, what we did was to kind of cluster the attributes, the customer characteristics together, and try to understand the associated revenue with each cluster. And we try to find the associated cost with each cluster. So it's actually quite a complicated model, but I think this is as simple as layman as I can make. Now, my presentation is about the journey, and therefore I would like to show what that project journey looks like. The key questions you should ask is, who should I involve in the project? Because this is a complicated project, we involve other departments in the project. In terms of data, we had the blessing of having the ability to pull the data, but because it's at a customer level, we have to be really careful with the data security. And as I said earlier, do proof of concepts. So we did not necessarily have to pull all the data, but we had smaller subsets. When it comes to insights, think about your business problem. Who are your good customers? Why is it important? And so on and so forth. Come up with a prediction, translate that prediction into something that is understandable to the customer, and then execute. So you might be wondering, so at the end of my engagement with STB and KPMG, did I manage to pull this off? The answer is yes. So what are we going to do going forward? We're going to repeat and do it all over again, but do something more robust, something that will be applicable post-COVID-19. So maybe I'll just end off with this big question. Actually, why do this now? Why do this case when it's COVID-19? Because the customers will change. Now, the bigger question is, why even do data analytics at all? Because I've shown you so many problems. I think Walt Disney said this, and I think it's inspiring, because what we want is an attitude and a culture of trying to improve all the time. We keep moving forward. We keep opening new doors, doing new things, because we are curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Leong, for your sharing. It's interesting to know what data can do for your business. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Kelly Yung, Director, Analytics Sentosa Development Corporation, where he leads the data and analytics team. Mr. Yung is passionate about the use of data to deliver business value and finds satisfaction in seeing analytics in action. In his presentation today, connecting the dots in the Sentosa ecosystem through data analytics, he will be sharing how they are understanding their guest segments better through data and their bigger plans to bring ecosystem partners together for data exploitation. Now, similarly, if you do have any questions for Mr. Yung, please send them into the chat box and he will address them during the panel discussion later. For now, please join me to welcome Mr. Kelly Yung.
Hi, a very good afternoon. I'm pleased to be here today to share with you Sentosa's journey in data analytics and how we think about bringing different partners, different stakeholders in our ecosystem together. But first, let me share with you an interesting nugget of information about the Sentosa Island itself. Well, back in the earlier days, the island itself was actually gazetted to be an oil refinery, and it was only in consultation with then Singapore's economic advisor, and the focus has shifted back to tourism. And that really saw the formation of the Sentosa Development Corporation, or SDC. Now, as SDC, we play many different roles. We are the manager, we are the owner, but in particular, one key area is really of paramount importance now. It's about aggregating diverse products and services and pulling them together and promoting them on the world stage. And nothing is actually more important in the situation that we are in right now. And that is not an easy undertaking. And here's the reason why. When you see the island in numbers, we have more than 30 attractions on the island. We have more than 3,000 rooms afforded by 17 hotels across the entire island. And we have a multitude of attractions right across the island. We have the top golf course on the island itself. And not forgetting, we have a good amount of residents on the island, 6,000 to be exact. Now, with the diverse and ecosystem of many, many different partners, how do we really deliver a one Sentosa experience? How do we make that experience consistent right across different partners? And how do we anchor ourselves to be one of the world's best loved resort and destination on the world map? Now, to really do that, you think about it, we have different legacy systems with our partners, right? We have different technology, different systems, different scale of business as well. So what is that one thing, right? That one thing that really brings and binds everybody together. That one thing is really about the currency, and that currency itself is data. Now, why does data as a currency works? A lot of this is really powered by the digitization of many businesses, right? When you look at the numbers, that is actually more than 5 billion mobile users across the world. They are, and more closer to home, locally, we have made 8 million mobile subscription. And what does that mean? And what does this number translate to? And that really translates to customers or consumers telling you a lot about themselves. Beyond just the static demographics, now what they are telling you is actually their preference and their taste at any one point in time. And that is contextualized. And that's contextualized because those are really digital intent that the customers are telling you. And that's really a whole slew of opportunity that can really be harnessed from this data itself. Now, this is really powered and fueled by the growth of digital native today as well. With the pandemic, it changes a lot of paradigm shift about the way people work, live, and play. And the third part, and very unique to the tourism industry, we are actually competing on the world stage, but yet the services are offered in a hyper-local destination itself. Right, with the right use of data, we can actually then customize the messages out correctly to various parts of the world. What does it mean to the different city, a different country, and of course, a different segment of people? Now, when you think about it, right, all of us are actually at some point in time touching parts of the customer journey, right? As the customer interact with you, you actually see when they actually touch base with you, buying your products and services. But what if, right? The question is really what if you get a good understanding of the entire customer journey itself from pre-trip to post-trip, and also how do we ask them to come back to your destination to consume your products and services. Now, that's really the key challenge ahead. And really for Sentosa, the question itself is really how might we understand our guests better? And to be specific about it, it's really how might we understand our guests better to really offer compelling and coherent products and services that are relevant at the particular point in time, right? We are really in the service industry. Malcolm has mentioned there's really a human factor involved. That's really a need to constantly adjust our strategy, how we go to market, how we communicate with the guests. And this statement itself, to be honest, there's no end point, right? Because it's an evergreen challenge. It's something that will evolve across time and something we need to keep our toes on, right? Earlier on, we saw early and leading indicators of the new normal, what we can use some of the Google tools and the insights to inform some of the strategy you may adopt as well. So that's really the kind of thinking of how we could possibly use data, not only data that you collect in your own organization, but third-party data sources as well. Now, like many organizations, during the pandemic, we really needed to get the whole island to be the top of mind across all our guests. And that we did because we look at the segment of our guests, and a large part of them is actually digital savvy. They are young. So what we did was really to partner with a popular Nintendo game, Animal Crossing. So what we did was recreate the virtual Sentosa within the game itself. Now that proved to be very useful. We saw more than 500,000 reach. We saw 7.5 billion impression. That's fantastic. And our earned PR value, we estimated it to be in excess of $2 million. Now, that's really about thinking about how we could use data and digital effectively to really engage your guests, even if they can't come to the island itself. Now, when things started to open up, similarly, we had capacity management system in place as well. Now, with the data collected from the systems, what can we do with that data? We can really think about how could we deploy sufficient manpower on the ground to ensure a safe environment and a safe experience. We also look at what if, right? What's the percentage of no-shows that come, that book and don't come, right? What can we do about that as well? There is a really, for us, to collect this data, forecast the demand ahead, and really look at the manpower that we can optimally deploy on the ground across all our beaches and the beach attraction itself. The third thing that Sentosa did, right, was with any rediscovering, right, it's about engaging the locals, right? Locals may know Sentosa as it is, but Sentosa is actually much more than just a state of fun. There's a huge area of heritage attractions related to nature, to culture, but yet when you come onto the island, the key question is actually how do you get there, especially when we have safe management measures in place? How do we get to the entrance of some of these attractions? And when you're there, how do you get around? So this is another area that we have leveraged on data and digital to really deploy chatbots, right? To really engage guests. As they come into the island, tell them what's the right preference, depending on the preference, what's the right area to go to, where to hit. So it's a digital and wayfinding technology that we have deployed. And today, within 2 months of launch, we saw close to 4,000 activations. Now, that's a promising number. Now, having said all this, right, these are just steps that SDC has done, right, in the area of data and digital. Keith earlier spoke about competition. How can we come together and compete as a destination? We cooperate, but yet you differentiate with your unique offering, with the service that you bring to your clients, right? So likewise, Sentosa, because of the diversity of the products and services that we have on the island, this is very much relevant to us. And this came at an opportune time, right? Where we're rethinking what can we further do to help our island partners in these tough times. So we put together a cross-functional team together with STB and also KPMG under the data transformation program, we talked and we generated more than 150 ideas within an hour. And we looked critically at some of these ideas, and 3 use cases actually came out tops. The first was really about really understanding the guest that comes onto the island. The second use case was about where do the guests go to, right? The situation awareness of where do the guests hang out or dwell. Now, building on this use case 1 and use case 2, that really led us thinking into, hey, why not bring on board our ecosystem partners as well, right? How can we help them in this situation, right? How can we generate more revenue, more visitorship to the island? And that led us thinking and embarking on My Sentosa 2.0 pilot. Now, it's more than a mobile app. It's more than a loyalty program. You might be thinking, right, this is just another loyalty program, isn't it? Right. But there's a lot of thought behind this. And the way we did it was there was a cross-functional team that was running this project. And we broke down some barriers as well. And one of the important things that we did here was about culture. The culture of being willing to test, learn, and of course build, alluding to what Ming Fai has earlier mentioned. And this is really much how we have approached this project itself. We wanted to engage our partners, right, to really test out different gamification mechanics. How can we drive certain behaviors, right, when they're on the island? How can we extend their stay at certain attractions or outlets as well? And how do we offer complementary services and products when they are at one of the outlets? We also wanted to test and learn about point economics. Now, running a loyalty program is about point economics. What does that 1 point equate to in terms of monetary value? So we ran this. In fact, it is still ongoing right now. It's a 6 weeks campaign, right? But what we do get is real-time data, and we adjust our mechanics accordingly based on the data that's fed back to us. And we really gotten some very interesting insights. There were a segment of people that was interested in supporting Sentosa's carbon neutral efforts. You would have heard in the news that Sentosa is actually on the way and putting in efforts to become a carbon neutral destination by 2030. Right? That was very heartening for us because there are segments of people that support our sustainability efforts. We also saw people that spend in excess of $1,000 and up, not on accommodations, but on attractions. And they are recurring visitors as well. Now, how can we then reward them more? So that's one question. So Malcolm alluded to how can we find good customers? So this is one example of them. And besides finding good customers, how can we make customers that are almost there to be even better? Or even customers that are not coming to the island to come onto the island itself, right? This is really the intent and the purpose of this program itself. Now, these are just initial steps in the whole data journey for SDC ahead. We think about data in many, many facets. We think about it in platforms. How can we actually enhance the value of data through the platforms, be it your own data that you collect on yourself or through third-party data itself. We run many data pilots projects to make sure we ascertain the value before we put it into production. We engage our partners together. We have a data exchange insights, collaborate together. And the fourth bit, which is really important, is about how to bring that set of expertise out to our partners as well. I mentioned earlier, because we have enterprises of varying scales on the island itself, how then can we make them have access to data science talent and tools, right? So these are really steps ahead for Sentosa. Now, I want to share hard truths, right, from really the Sentosa perspective as well. One of the key tenets is when you find and you do a survey of our success rate of data science project, it has been proven challenging, but the challenge comes from a multitude of factors. It could be access to talent. It could be not having the right tools. It could be embarking on a wrong project itself. There are many, many reasons for that. But I just wanted to share what then can we do about this challenging success rate. Now, there are 4 Ps, right? Just like 4 Ps of marketing, there are 4 Ps of data science and data initiative as well. The first of which is really finding the right problem to solve, right? Is it worth it? Is it worth solving? Is it real? Is it a win for the organization when we solve this problem? Right? Problem, it needs to be solved to make something. You need actionable insights in order to solve the problems. And that's really about the second P itself, proposition. What kind of proposition are you bringing to your stakeholders? Right? Who are your key stakeholders and what's the outcome when you do solve those problems? The third bit is about platforms. Platforms about enhancing the value of the data, making data accessible to every single member of the organization, right? And the fourth bit is really about people. Really, people makes the most difference, right? In how they think about data, how they use data effectively across organization. Now, these are just some nuggets of path to success. What I wanted to leave you with, right? Having the right data strategy is a half step forward. But having the right culture across the entire organization is a right step forward for organization success in data. With this, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young, for your sharing. It's amazing what we can possibly achieve when partners are also on board to share and analyze data together. Next, I would like to invite Mr. David Lim, General Manager, Bounce Singapore Private Limited. Mr. Lim has extensive marketing and attractions industry experience in both the public and private sectors for over 22 years. He currently manages Bounce, Zero Latency, and Forest Adventure in Singapore, and is also an executive committee member of the Association of Singapore Attractions. In his presentation, Data Capability Building, Speaking the Same Lingo, he will be sharing how they build data capabilities in staff so that everyone has the same mindset to testbed new solutions for future expansion to multiple sites. Please join me to welcome Mr. David Lim.
Good afternoon. Hi, my name is David Lim, and I'm here to share our data transformation process with everyone. So firstly, who are we? The overview of our Singapore business, basically there are 3 attractions that we have here. The company started in 2016 with Bounce. That was our first attraction foray into Singapore. It is a trampoline park located on Orchard Road. In 2017, we then opened Zero Latency. That's a free roam VR attraction located at Suntec. The third attraction that we added was in 2019 when the business actually acquired and took over an existing attraction called Forest Adventure. So essentially, we're talking about, we have including part-time and full-time staff, more than 200 staff, and at any one point in time, and we're looking at an annual turnover of about $7 million. However, technically, we're still an SME, and ultimately, it is also a very strong operations crew with backed up by a smaller HQ team. So when we first embarked with Bounce and Zero Latency, both franchises, because they're part of global franchises, they came with extensive data capabilities. We would get reports upon reports. We get reams after reams of numbers and data. But one of the challenges that we felt was that it was really hard to use that data for a lot of analytics because of the way the data has been collected, right? So it was a very unusual situation when we actually did speak to some people in the data field that whilst we had the data, it was still hard for us to do any form of analysis to it. Plus the fact that we are also relatively new. So you don't have a history of data to look right back into it. And with all these sort of limitations, only very superficial sort of analytics was done. One of the things that my shareholders have always been bugging me is what other forms of analysis can we do? What else can we find out from data? So the desire was there, but also at the same time, especially for a business in its infancy and with the constant rate of expansion over the last few years, there were other more trying day-to-day sort of priorities that we had to look into. Obviously, the business needs to succeed first before you actually even look into the data and try to get smarter at it. So there were a lot of these factors that kind of hamstrung our quest to go towards being more data-driven. So it was 2020 that brought us, ironically, to a stage. So the pandemic, we were affected like everyone else. We are still struggling up to now, to be honest. But ultimately, it is a process whereby we actually, when we reopened in July of last year, we saw a very encouraging return of a lot of our customers. Some people say it's pent-up demand. Some people said that the lockdown will do that. But the good thing was that we saw a lot of our regulars coming back. So the question started to form internally. Why are they coming back? What did we do right so that they will come back to us the minute we reopen? So these questions started forming in our mind. At around the same time, STB came to us and said that they were starting a new course. It's called the STB Data Analytics Shift, the DASH program. And basically, it's a change management program which enables companies to ideate and develop special projects, specific projects, and look at providing advisors and training along the way to help us in this process. So in October last year, in the first run of the DASH course, myself and my finance colleague, we decided to embark on this course to see what else we can do, what else we can learn from this process. It was very useful because it went back to basics. Now, for any of y'all who work in an SME, you will understand this, that your 100% of your time whilst you're in the office is dedicated to dealing with operational issues. And if you're in my position as the GM, you'll be dealing with everybody's issues. So it didn't really doesn't give you a lot of time to think. But this course did, right? And it went back to theoretical groundings again, and we could apply it to what we do in our business. It encouraged us to actually look at how we would ourselves, if we had to redesign a technological skeleton, backbone, the blueprint of what an ideal attraction should be. And then along the way, for our newest business, which is Forest Adventure, we decided to also around that point in time that we needed to undertake this upgrade of our ticketing system over there. However, when the two of us brought these learnings and this sort of discussions back to the rest of the team, we realized there was a disconnect. The rest of the team members were going like, what are you guys talking about? So we felt that, it was just the two of us weren't enough. So we decided at the next run of the course, we sent 4 other colleagues for the course. So these people are namely the finance, marketing, operations, and sales, and of course myself. So all of us, the second run of the course were the marketing and sales teams that went for the course. And they started continuing on from us because we decided to do the ticketing system at Forest Adventure as our primary project. These guys continued from that process into looking at the collection of pertinent data that would follow after that. And that will with the eventual goal of building a CRM system for forest adventure. And we don't want to stop there. All right. Along the process, we are looking at other forms, and we hope that, personally, I do hope that, along this process of discovery, that we will find the needs and be able to hone our data collection and our data analytics capability in-house. As I said, we did it at Forest Adventure because it is a non-franchise business, and it was easier for us to take a clean sheet approach. So, very simply, they started off with this question, which is, how do we increase revenue? I know it looks incredibly rudimentary, but as an operator, day in, day out, how often do we think about it? We do think about it, but we don't spend enough time diving deep into it. So 2 ways would be finding new customers, and then the other one would be retaining your current customers. And these are the immediate priorities that we have kind of looked at, and we are going to build into our system in terms of 2 key drivers would be understanding our customers' demographics, and also at the same time from there, understanding what do we need to retain them. So in the end, step 1, I proudly have to say that our ticketing system migration is pretty much done. We will be going live sometime in March for the new ticketing system. Along the way, we also decided to build a new website, and that has also been completed. So the team right now is also identifying the right data sets from the system. And it's not just only the ticketing system that would give us the data, but we also get data from our new digital waiver system and also the post-visit survey. Once we bring that information together, the team will then sit down on a monthly basis and start looking at the analytics part of the data and trying to understand where is this guiding us towards. So I think at the end, for us, data, I believe that the data-driven approach is basically for everyone, and definitely even so for SMEs. Now, the core team that I have that looks at data with me is less than 10. I do not have a big team. I do not have data scientists, but just as long as the team has the right questioning mindset, you can do it. And a lot of the analysis doesn't require the likes of Python or advanced analytics or codes. You can even do it on something as simple as Excel. The other thing to remember is a data culture needs to be pervasive throughout the entire organization, but it starts with the leadership, because a key part of it is trust. A lot of the data that we give to our staff is somewhat sensitive, things like revenue, profitability. So we have to be careful with it. But you are never going to build a culture unless you start trusting your staff with that sort of data. Of course, don't do it blindly. Look at the staff that you have and decide at the end of the day whether they are worthy. And as part of the process, you can also have safeguards in terms of that data transparency with them. But on the flip side, which brings me to the next point, is that it is a great staff retention tool. Now, as an SME, I can't afford to pay big bucks, big bonuses. It is impossible. But showing that level of trust towards our staff, and these staff, some of them are just fresh out of school. They have a questioning mindset, and they have never imagined that they would be dealing with issues of that high order, of that high level, and having conversations at management level. So it's a great engagement tool, and it's a great way for your staff to actually improve themselves also. Taking a pragmatic approach is key, I would say, because at the end of the day, there is a huge push, be it from stakeholders, be it from owners, be it from vendors, to digitize your business. But as an SME, and during these very trying times, I would say, take a pragmatic approach. If you need it, do it, right? But don't overextend yourself. There's really a right time and a right place for everything. The other key point, which is also a bit of a sensitive one, is the use of third party, be it resellers, be it other vendors out there. You should collect your own data. You should know more about your customers than they do. So ultimately, always make sure that you have that control. And the key thing is to actually keep encouraging an ongoing process within the team to question the business. Because I always believe if the team gets smarter, we all get smarter, and the business will actually be better at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lim, for your sharing. It is indeed important for the whole team to speak the same language and advance together in the use of data. We will be entering into our panel discussion now, which will be led by our panel moderator, Mr. Paul Kent. Mr. Kent currently leads the economics and analytics business for KPMG Singapore and is one of STB's appointed consultants. He has a strong analytical background and has worked extensively with both the public and private sector and across the tourism industry in Singapore. Joining Paul and our speakers on this panel, we have Mr. Ian Wilson, who was the Senior Vice President of Non-Gaming Operations at Marina Bay Sands, with about 5,000 staff and nearly $1 billion in revenue. Ian is currently the CEO of Wilson Innovation Lab and concurrently chairman of NUS Business Analytics Center Advisory Board. Ian is also one of STB's appointed business mentors for the Data Analytics Shift, known as DASH program. Can I invite Mr. Paul Kent, Mr. Ian Wilson, Mr. Malcolm Leong, Mr. Kelly Yung, and Mr. David Lim on stage for our panel discussion, please. Handing the time over to you, Paul.
Thanks very much. It's my great pleasure to have the opportunity to moderate the panel in front of you distinguished gentlemen. So before we start, a couple of quick things is I would like to open a poll. So the first poll question that we would like to ask is, how important is data and analytics to your organization, being 1, most important, to 5, least important? Second thing that I'd like to say is there's a chat function, so please use the chat function. Love to get some questions and feed it back to the panelists. With that, we're going to kick it off. So I'd like to invite Ian. Ian, would you like to say a few opening remarks, please?
Sure, thanks, Paul. I think it's clear from what we're hearing today and what you see in the environment that really every business is a data business, and it's quite exceptional that many companies have classified themselves one way, such as Google, as a search engine company, and then they start on this journey and then they reclassify themselves as a data company. Another example would be AirAsia, not being an airline, but now classifying themselves as a data company. I think that, I'm not going to repeat what everyone said, but I'd like to highlight a couple of the key messages that came during the conversation today. One is that this is a journey. It's not a destination. It is not all about a huge infrastructure. In fact, the advice would be to start small and to iterate and to learn as you go. Don't bet the farm on any one initiative. My opinion is that success with data and analytics is about 10 to 20% infrastructure and about 80% building a culture where people will use data effectively to allow you to learn faster about almost any area of your business, whether that be marketing, whether that be service, whether that be productivity, whether that be the building that you're operating in. But it's building the muscles of using this information and then building a culture where your data is democratized and where people are willing to run experiments constantly. So that means a lot of stuff isn't going to work, but a lot of stuff is going to work as you go along. As you build this cadence, you gain momentum. And I guess my final comment would be, this is not something you can instantly catch up on. I mean, you can bring in McKinsey, and with all due respect, you can bring in KPMG, but they're not going to suddenly catapult your organization to the forefront of all those who've been working on this for years, because it is so cultural. So this is, we've seen in the world today, a lot of winner takes all type situations. And my advice to everybody would be to get going on this journey. It's later than you think, but the returns are exceptional if you really start to embark on it.
Thanks a lot, Ian. It's very good comments. You've touched on cultures being a very important part, and actually everybody that spoke today touched on culture. David, I really liked your sharing around your younger staff. And then both of you as well, Kelly and Malcolm. So I'd like to ask a little bit more about how do you go about creating culture within your organizations and recognizing, as you just mentioned, it's not something that's easily done, but it's such an essential part of what you need to do. So doing first, Malcolm, some thoughts from you?
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess one of the interesting things about Far East, I've been with Far East for quite a while, almost 10 years. So I not only seen data transformation, I've seen how the leadership has really transformed. So one of the key things is not really about data analytics, but really how the leadership views data. And when it comes to, even for us, when we open new hotels, it's no longer about what's the assumptions. Are your assumptions backed by data? Why are you proposing this? So I have a couple of my Far East colleagues on the call. I'm very sure they can vouch for this because we have to be very, very robust when we put up a case. And that helps to permeate downwards because when the leadership is strong, just like David was running his ship, that really permeates downwards to the team. Yeah. I think the second thing, not to a quick one, is really about the communications. I would use the analogy of the weather forecast. It's extremely complicated to actually forecast the weather. You need a lot of instruments, you need a supercomputer. How do you communicate the weather to the right person? So for me, who might be going for a swim, the weather forecast output is different from a pilot who needs it very much more complex. So as a person who's running the data analytics team, I think when you want to build a culture, you do not necessarily need them to know the ins and outs of the data. But if, for example, my front office team, they might need it in a very simple format. Yeah. So I think communication is also key.
Thanks a lot, Malcolm. David, maybe I'd like to hear your thoughts from an SME perspective and a bit more about your sharing to the younger staff.
I think the key thing for me, is to constantly question, right? We've done this promotion, we've done this tactic. What is our success rate? Are we measuring the success rate? Very often in the earlier stages, I would run the analysis myself and then bring it back to them and show them how I did it. And it's like, guys, I asked a question last week, here's the answer. This is what. But what I found was that it brought out more questions. And if I was the one who was going to poke holes into it, the rest of the team was joining in. They were going like, yeah, no. And the best thing is that with younger staff, they are even more critical and a little less cautious about such things. And then they will start firing. And that's great because it brings the whole process along. The challenge sometimes would be those that have been in the working world for a while or used to the old system whereby everything is siloed. Operations is operations. I don't care what happens to sales. Sales will take care of it. And some people get very cautious when you cross boundaries. I had to get rid of that very quickly because it needed to be a cross-functional. We're SME. I don't need lines to be drawn. And that allows us to succeed where SME should, because we are nimble, because we're small. We should be able to react fast. So, being able to share data like that, but first and foremost, back to the question is, I had to do it myself. I'm not some, Malcolm came to ask me whether, what sort of experience I have. As I said in my presentation just now, Excel is enough for the time being. I mean, you don't have to get it 100% right, but if it feels right, it guides, the results are just there, I think you can run with it to make a decision.
That's excellent, David. It leads me to a couple of other questions as well, which I'll come back to. Ian, would you like to just share a few more thoughts around that as well? I think it's such an important element.
Yeah. I mean, I think not to reiterate what everyone else has said, but I think educate. We actually paired a lot of our data work with Lean, and we found that there was tremendous synergy between the two of those because it allows you to understand the current state, which is part of what Lean is, and it allows you to then see what the change was that you were able to accomplish. I would say democratize data, which we've spoken to, and look for some quick wins as you get going. What projects can you do that you know you can execute that actually will have a substantial or marked impact on the organization, so that that helps you gain some momentum as you get going, or as you go along. I think you know, often people will have a huge amount of data, and I think the key is having the right questions as opposed to other things. So even just start question storming. Come up with all the things you really wish you knew, because once you have that list, then you can start to look at how might we possibly answer that question. And as you start to answer those questions, you really start to gain some real momentum. So I've found that to be very effective as well.
Excellent. Okay, we've got a few questions which are coming in, and there's quite an interesting theme coming along around basically the benefits. And I feel that articulation of benefits, that the outcomes, positive outcomes, are part of that culture change and journey. So there was some questions specifically, Kelly, around Sentosa.
Right.
But there's also some mention of yourself as well, David. And so what I'll do is I'll start, Kelly, this question with you about on some of the journey that you've undertaken so far. What's some of the benefits that you have seen? And I'll pass this out broader to the rest of the group as well.
Right. I think the first and foremost is about proliferating the culture within the team itself. It's a cross-functional team. It breaks down certain bias, certain intuition that you might have after doing the job for so long, right? In certain positions, certain mechanics just work. But that doesn't mean that we should throw away things that doesn't work, because the world is changing very fast and people do change, right? I think this whole situation is a good example, right? What most people would not be comfortable with has become the new normal. We work from home, right? The way we do our recreation activities. So people do change. And likewise, the whole population and the guests that comes into Singapore, or rather into Sentosa, do change. And what we did was, we look at the revenue to cost ratio. And as the campaign is running now, I'm quite pleased to say that we are really in a positive double-digit area, right? That was very encouraging for the team, right? And one of the key things that we really was quite surprised, there were a segment of people that was supporting Sentosa's efforts in being a carbon neutral destination, right? They contributed the points for that cause itself, right? There were a lot of different learning points from this. The team also benefited because it was a cross-functional team. The views were diverse. It was really a curiosity. The intention to test, learn, and ask the right questions, right? That was very important. And those were very positive benefits for the organization as a whole.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
David, same question to you. And again, you had some interesting perspectives before. Some of the more, doesn't need to be complex analytics, the importance of information and data. Could you elaborate a little bit more about some of the tools you use and then the benefits you see as a result of that type of activity?
Yeah. I think at this point in time, as I mentioned in the presentation, we are still not out of the woods with all the restrictions. So the business is still struggling at this point. But one of the things that I dare say is that we understand our customers a lot better. We know their trigger points. So if all these sort of things, when you bring together, once you know your customers a lot better, then it's a lot easier to create products that they want, right? To deliver it to them in the way that they want. We're not perfect, and I won't be the first to say that I'm perfect, but we are still in this process of trying to understand them. As Kelly said, with this current situation, with this pandemic right now, a lot of the learnings that we had in the past were just gone overnight, right? And we are relearning again. And those customers that have our regulars who came pre-COVID versus vis-a-vis coming in now have also changed a little bit. So it is a process of this rediscovery again. But that being said, one of the key positives that I would say that has come out of this process is that the team discussions, it's minor at this point, but even within discussions within the team, we're taking a lot higher level conversations. People are willing to dig deep. People are less, the culture-wise, less conscious of drawn lines like, oh, I'm not going to encroach on what marketing's turf is going to be. people are freely questioning. And I think that's a good step because as a team right now, regardless whether you're finance, your sales, your operation, or your marketing, you should know the customer, right? And that is a key piece of data points. I mean, that's a good cross understanding across all the functions that we should have in the first place.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Ian, the same question to you. So you've come from industry, you had quite a strategic role there, and now you're working across the industry. What do you see as some of the benefits that you can?
I would say that you have the ability to improve rapidly against your KPIs, iteratively, but much more quickly than an organization that doesn't. So more revenue, better service, better productivity, more team member engagement. I would say that your employees feel that they have much more control over what's happening because they can see a cause and effect. So you really get much better feeling for what has an impact and what doesn't. You start to understand what the 20% is that drives 80% of your results, and you start to build a cadence of understanding of the business through a methodical and regular review of the data that's coming out of it. So I think everyone becomes a better leader as a result of it, but you can improve just so much more quickly, and I think that's the key competitive advantage.
Fantastic. Okay, we've got a question from Shirley. I'll open it to the panelists. I'm mindful that it will mean different things to different people on the panel. But the question is, it's important to balance statistical data with customer feedback. How do you get a balanced quantitative data versus qualitative data? How do you get that balance? And perhaps if I could share something which you've all elaborated on, is this multidisciplinary approach, which I also feel is you've all touched on it and I completely agree with it. So balancing quantitative with qualitative, maybe a little bit of multidisciplinarity in there as well. Malcolm, start with you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, especially for our industry. So we are in the service industry, so without doubt, you will have customer data. I think David was sharing during the lunchtime how important it is for him to go down on the field, on the ground, to actually understand the customer. But when it comes to analytics, I think you still need to build some form of models out of it to get some strategy and insights. So if it's purely words, you use natural language processing and whatnot to kind of get some insights, but you still need to come up with a strategy and tactic. So I feel that in the end, you still would want to have a fair bit of quantitative data, to support that case. Otherwise, it's a bit of fair biases, because people who give you feedback may be biased by themselves. You know, I'm very unhappy, therefore I write in, or I'm extremely happy and therefore I write in. How about the person in between? Yeah. So I think this has to be more business case specific before you really understand where the true balance is.
Yeah. Kelly, would you like to?
Yeah, if I were to really make my comments on this, it really depends on the kind of products and offering you're actually putting out there. Whether you're going after a mass segment, which the amount of data, the quantitative side of things will work well. If you're going for a very niche segment of customers, every single feedback does matters. And those feedback are very important clues for you to understand the circumstances whereby those comments were made, be it good or be it negative, right? And those clues really leads you to more question, improving some hypothesis, which you then try to find out in what circumstances, in what situation, but the negative comments or negative feelings were being made. Because we are all in the service industry, and that's very important. We take every feedback very seriously, right? Yeah. So the context, the offerings that you are really putting out there does make a difference. It's really what we experience on social media. There's always that vocal minority, and the silent majority as well, right? But what do we make sense of those comments that came through onto the media platform? Does it hurt your brand equity? Is it something worth investigating? And that's really the questions that various organizations must ask themselves.
Excellent. Then quickly, David or Ian, would you either or both like to
I would say that a lot of the quantitative data tells you what happened, and the qualitative data often tells you why did it happen. I think the other thing is it'll give you insights as you look at, a lot of the quantitative data is how we keep score. What was my net promoter score? What was the profit at the end of the month, or other things? But as you use the qualitative data, it can help you put better measures in place to measure the processes that produce those outcomes as well, which is really helps you become much more effective at actually moving those end measures. So it just gives you great insights.
Fantastic.
It doesn't, I mean, carrying on from there, it doesn't take a lot of effort, as we were saying, just walk out there. I mean, we are in the service industry. It's like, this has been repeated so many times, but too often I feel that, and this is sometimes my own self-reflection, too often I spend too much time in the office, right? I should be walking out there, having a chat randomly with the customer. How's your day? How's things? When we were first allowed to reopen, I spent some time even doing safe entry and temperature taking and talking to the customers, observing the customers. What were they looking for? Who were the people coming back? And you get a good sense from there in terms, I'm not saying spend all your time because I've got more than enough things to do across 3 different businesses, but spending some time on the ground is essential, right? To understand your business and understand your customer.
That's very good. I need to make an apology to Irene. This question was actually from Irene, and it popped up just as I was reading the one from Shirley. So I'll go back now to the question from Shirley. If you see the chat, you'll understand what I mean. But Shirley's question was, very often we look at historical data, like performance of a promotion. How about real-time data? How do the panelists capitalize on that to achieve real-time efficiency? And it's quite a complex and deep question because it comes into architecture and all sorts of factors as well as data collection. So again, from each of your perspectives, and you touched on actually, Ian, a little bit about looking at a historical view, but also what some of the initiatives you might be taking to have a more real-time view. And I think, Ian, I'll just start up with you on this one.
Well, I mean, I think real-time data is very effective for your key metrics that are critical for your success. So what's the lineup at the front desk? How long is it taking me to bring cars up right now for valet department? How many rooms are clean right now? Those kind of key metrics. So I think it's very useful for you to be aware of what the current situation is. Problem is you didn't head it off at the pass. So I see the real-time metrics as being the stepping stone to being the predictive metrics. So it's fine to say we're sinking like a rock right now, but could we have foretold that we were going to be sinking like a rock at this time yesterday, in which case, what could we do about it? So it's really important to know, but when you see those metrics come up, then you start to dig into it and say, why did that happen? And then how can we avoid that happening? And it's often just better forecasting tools and other things, and that's part of the journey.
Very good. Yeah.
Maybe if I were to add on to that,
Please.
right? On real-time data, a lot of times organizations need to consider, are there levers that they can actually pull in real-time fashion, right? If they are not, then you need to reconsider. Do you need to build those levers? Or is this real-time data valuable to the organization as well? And that's a very important consideration for organizations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to echo what Kelly just said. Because in the hotel, you have operations, you have sales and marketing. Does everything need to be real time? Because real time means expensive also. So maybe from some operations perspective, some things might need to be real time. But from a sales and marketing perspective, how real time do you need it to be? Do you need by the minute, by the second? Probably not. I can sleep overnight and I can still get the results. So I think there's no need to have a nuclear weapon for every scenario. Or sometimes a simple pistol will do. Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add to that one?
Yeah, I mean, from an SME perspective, the issue is with real-time data, who's looking at it? And, if nobody is even looking at it, why are we having it, right? Is it a nice to have? The only real-time data that we have right now is probably for the operations, the frontliners, because they need to keep track of who's coming in, have they gone through the actual processes of, registration, waiver signing, and all that sort of stuff. But back to Malcolm's point, is it necessary for everyone else? Because that being said, we're running a very lean team. So if no one's going to pick up that data, real time or not, then I question its utility.
So making sure that it's useful
Exactly.
and plays an important part
Exactly.
in the decision-making process.
Exactly.
Okay, another question from Tiong Hua Kung. It's related again, so you can start to see some trends here. But how can we use historical data, real-time data, spend data, demographics, geo-source, gender, etc., to form learning behavior in order to move into predictive and prescriptive type analytics? Now, on this question, answer it more generally, because each of you got, I know you've all got different sort of perspectives on this, but taking information which is probably exists historically in databases, what do you do to look for to get more insights out of that, combine it with some other sources of data perhaps, try to look out into the future, or even some of the strategies or plans you might be thinking about going forward to address this? Open up to if anybody would like to have a crack at it first.
Actually, for the attractions business, dynamic pricing is the holy grail, right? When everyone talks about it, it's the white whale of our business. I know there are systems out there, but how many people actually have adopted it? But it takes together all those components that was asked in the question and it feeds it in. And it is something that we would like to move towards, but at this stage, it still looks a bit like a pipe dream for me right now. But systems do exist for this sort of predictive analytics to happen. But I would say dynamic pricing would be the most interesting one. I mean, the hotels have done it into an art form, the airlines have done it into an art form, but certain industries, such as attractions, still struggle with that.
Yeah.
Really good.
Maybe I would advise the organization to really start not from the data standpoint, but really from the objective and the intent of what you're using the data for. I think that's really more important. With the right questions and the right outcomes that you put really on the table, that's where you start pulling different buckets or different kinds of data together that could answer the question, right? And if is it worth it, build a data product around it and get it embedded into your business process. And that kind of solves the investment, especially for SMEs, right? That could be one of the way out, because if you can't get access to talent, automate it, right?
And there are plenty of off the shelf, right? I mean, you don't always have to build something, right?
Yes.
Maybe I'll add on to what Kelly said, using an example from Far East. Some of you may know that we opened a new modern luxury hotel, the Clan Hotel, just on 1st of March, not too long ago. And we are targeting luxury customers. So going back to Kelly's point, when you are very clear about your objective, then you might start thinking about how to use data better. So the question to us is, we are looking for luxury customers, obviously based in Singapore because the borders are not open. How are you going to do that better and better over time, as fast as possible, right? So obviously we have some learnings from another luxury property of ours, the Barracks Hotel. Use that learnings, put it into the Clan Hotel, observe real time. So that observation of real time has use because you want to optimize the ads as fast as possible. And going back to David's point, we didn't build it ourselves. We used Google's product, right? So not all analytics needs to be built by ourselves. Yeah.
Really good. Ian, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that all historic information is the foundation of all forecast models, and so you need that information. And the real time may be telling you is it changing on a dime, which it's not going to in all instances. But you need a solid foundation which to then start to build effective forecast models. And once again, you don't have to do it all. There's some amazingly powerful tools now to help you build forecast models from your own information and from information that you can source publicly. And of course, if you're looking at things like Stan, et cetera, in the future, you're going to have that many more data points that you can pull from. So it's then starting to improve the efficacy of those models. So that may be, how do I find more customers like the good customers that I'm getting today? Or how busy am I going to be next Tuesday? And how many staff do I need to be working at any point in time? Or which areas of my operation have inversely correlated demand curves, and what are their forecasted volumes going to be? And could I get people to shift from place to place in order to optimize my labor? So it's very iterative, and then you want to just track. Were we close, or were we a million miles off? And can we get the model to be better, or is it are we constantly sailing off down the wrong path?
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. Okay. Quickly on the first poll, I'd like to close the first poll if possible, and then we can look at the results of that. I'd like to move now to the second polling question. It was a very simple question. Is your organisation actively implementing a data and analytics strategy? Yes or no? Then to come back now to, and perhaps one last thing is, please keep using the chat function. It's great to see your questions. And I'm happy to pass those to the panellists. Now, the question I had is around data collection. So we talk a lot about models and historical, predictive, prescriptive. Could you, each of you, perhaps elaborate on some of the areas that you use to collect data? Where do you look for information to help you inform decisions better? And mixing that with the qualitative side, as we've been discussing. Anyone would like to go first?
Everywhere. Anything I can get data from. And I think that, the power of digitalization now, especially with IoT and things like that, is you get good data that comes out of it, as opposed to where, like a property management system, where people may have bastardized the field or something in order to make it work for their own purposes. But I'd look at as many sources as you can get. I think the real power comes when you start to triangulate data from many, many different places. That's when you start to have deep and interesting insights.
Very true. Anybody?
Well, I will add on to this point. Look everywhere, but just take enough, right? Because we run the risk of being a data hoarder, right? If we took too many data, which has proven not useful in certain questions that you wanted to answer. So that's really important. Be absolutely razor sharp about the usefulness of the data. I think that's critical and important as well. So look everywhere, but take just enough.
In fact, I totally agree with Kelly's point, just to echo that point, because I said it in my presentation. For my two franchise businesses that I run, a lot of the data they give me is totally useless. And they just spam you. In one case, they even send it to you at 1:05 a.m. every night for some weird reason. But why? What insights can I derive from this? What utility does this data have? In fact, sometimes some data, you could actually be in breach of PDPA, right? So you've got to be careful about the data you collect. But there are tons of data collection sources, even just within in-house. For a smaller operation like mine, we already got ticketing, we've got waivers, we've got post-visit surveys, we've got marketing, we've got finance, and those are just a small handful of data points that we have. So you've got to be really careful, and it is possible to get paralysis from data, and just back away. But back to Kelly's point was, what is the question you want to ask first? Don't look at the data. What are you trying to resolve? Right? What issue are you trying to resolve? Start from there.
Really good. Okay, quickly just to summarize the first poll. So 50% scored data and analytics in the organisation as being the most important. It just dropped actually to 46% as I said that. It's now real time. It's now 2 was 31%, 3, 15%. So we could say half, around 2/3 of the respondents see it as an important part. So taking into the points you've been making, it is important, but there's a balance between understanding what do you need, what is useful, don't overgo, spend a lot of money on data which may not be useful. So from a process point of view, if somebody is out there looking at starting a journey, what would be some of the questions they need to ask in terms of, where do we start and what do we need to do? And how do we not fall into the trap of asking for so much data that it's not useful? from a process point of view, any thoughts that you would do around the planning side to do this?
Maybe I'll start first, building on what I presented earlier. When we started our journey, we presented our 5-year plan. And I think that's a good starting point. And I like the idea of just throwing out questions, because by throwing out questions, that helps you formulate your first steps. And by thinking far ahead, you get a good idea of where you want to head instead of just play along as you go along. Yeah. So I think that is a good starting point. So you have lots of questions. And maybe building on to the earlier question about collecting the data. As part of the PDPA process, we are required to have a data inventory map. So I'm sure we are all PDPA compliant, therefore we have the data inventory map actually available. That gives you a list of systems that collects personal data. Now the question is, why don't you expand it a bit more? Not just personal data, maybe a system inventory map. So you have lots of questions, you have a list of systems. That gives you some vague idea of how to start that journey. Yeah, so that's my suggestion.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So Malcolm really shared about beginning with the end in mind. I think that's very important. And when you have the end in mind, you can really start to think about how do you get there in various steps, right? Start with the most pertinent questions that will deliver the most value to your key stakeholders. And that naturally will get buy-in, slowly change the culture within an organization, and you build on top of those successes, right? And slowly you can see more and more people will be together with you on this journey itself. It's almost like changing the culture of the organization one step at a time. I think it's really important to begin and be focused on what you want to achieve, and it's stacked on top of the projects. Make sure those projects does not become a one-off kind of demonstration projects. That's something that you don't want. You really want to deliver outcomes, and with those outcomes, you can continue to build on top of those projects as well. And that's really important, and that's something to keep in mind. And don't forget, there's really a lot of resources out there in the industry, right? Be it STB, be it industry partners, be it IHL as well, right? So do tap on and partner, because those organizations has done data science for the longest time, and do tap on the expertise to really leapfrog the organization. That would be my advice to organizations starting out on the data journey itself.
I think the key thing is just focus what's the issue that you have to deal with. I mean, we don't do data for the sake of data. And especially for SMEs where we are very resource thin, it should be there as a tool to solve a problem. And you just collect what you need to solve that, to answer that question. And I'll just stop there. Not anymore, unless we have a lot of time, but we don't have the resources to do it. No.
Agree. Ian?
What are the questions you want to answer? What questions can you answer with the data that you have today? What information do you wish you had? And that starts to put you on a journey towards those things. Start small and iterate, because you know what? You kind of do this as you go along, and you realize that you didn't think of this or that, or that the question wasn't right, because often the question needs to be further articulated as you go along. And so these iterations, I think, are very, very helpful to help build an organization that's learning. And then it's not just a revenue management function or a marketing function, it's an everywhere function. So how do you get the entire organization starting to think these ways? And as was alluded to before, how does everybody share their data? Because I can show you how information coming out of housekeeping is really important to human resources, for instance, or there's many different, or building data really has a big impact on operations or other things. So the more the people you have working together collaboratively on this, the more powerful it'll be.
Awesome. Okay, we're running out of time, conscious of time, we've got 3 minutes to go. I'm gonna try to squeeze in 2 more questions. If somebody would like to ask a question, I would love to ask it to the panelists. But quickly, challenges. What sort of challenges have you faced on your journey? And we've got 3 minutes, I want to ask one more question. So I quickly start with you, Malcolm. What some of the challenges you faced?
I think the biggest challenge is not from the data perspective, as I shared. It's really about implementation, getting the people to do it. Because you face a lot of human factors that data is easy. You realize that data is the easiest part. So yes, I think we spoke a fair bit about the challenges from an organization perspective, getting the buy-in. I think those are good takeaways. Yeah.
Excellent.
I think first and foremost, culture. It's about changing behaviors, changing culture. To make people change is always a difficult task. It's always an uphill task. But one step at a time, deliver results, and we'll get there.
Excellent.
Not much different from the previous two gentlemen. It is all starts from culture. I guess from an SME perspective, it's easier for me because I take full leadership. I take full responsibility, so it's easy for me to effect change. But I've been part of larger organizations before, and I can tell you, it is hard when one department doesn't want to share data with another department for whatever reasons. Then you're going to run into issues. I think the key challenge is getting that information flow readily available for everybody. And also at the same time, I think it's also a cultural issue here to a certain degree in Asia, whereby you don't question authority, but to have that questioning mindset, sometimes that needs to be broken down a little bit. I love it when some of the young staff come up to me and shoot me a question. And they should, right? It keeps me on my toes. And it just makes everyone smarter, as I said.
I agree with that too.
Yeah.
Same culture we have. Ian?
Just if you don't have senior leadership buy-in, don't bother.
Okay. Very good. All right. Last question. Flip to the last question. But what I'd like to say is, could each of you summarize 3 key things that you would recommend to the audience that they should consider on their data and analytics journey? Same with you, Ian. 3 in. We've got
3
1
key
minute.
things. Well, I would just say start to measure, because once you start to measure things, you can start to manage them and you create a need. 2, use a pull strategy rather than a push strategy. Find out who's keen and work with them. As they start to have successes, others will come along. And then I would say teach, teach, teach. So the more people understand about it, the more comfortable they'll be with it, the less afraid of it they'll be. That's where I'd go.
Number 1, record all your learnings, right? Even if it's not in a quantitative way, a qualitative way, having that knowledge base internally so that we don't make the same mistakes again. So write everything down, preferably digitally. There are still some functions within my organization that irks me because we're still filling forms. But digitizing then makes that a data point that is available for future collection. And it's environmentally more sound too. And I would still go back culture, right? It's still the most important thing. Otherwise, everything else it's just redundant.
Excellent.
So my topmost consideration is really about culture. I think that's the topmost thing on top of people's mind, right? When you want to start embarking on this journey itself. The second area is actually propositions, right? The problems that you're trying to answer should lead to propositions and good propositions to the organizations. And the third bit is about learnings. It's okay to fail, but when you fail, you do take the learnings and you build on top of that. It's not that we purposefully wanted to fail, but you take the learnings and make sure you validate certain hypotheses as well. I think that's quite important because things don't always work out all the time.
I won't share 3 because all of them shared 3. It's too difficult for me. I'll just share 1. And that was my closing remark for my presentation. Be brave, go forth, open new doors. Don't hesitate, just start doing it. Because the longer you wait, like Ian say, the further you lag behind. Thank you.
Fantastic. So, gentlemen, I just want to say thanks for your time. If there's an audience, I'd ask everybody to clap. But anyway, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. And handing it back over.
Malcolm, Kelly, and David for the lively discussion. Now, we hope that this has inspired everyone to do more with data and compete as an ecosystem. It's been a wonderful afternoon of sharing ideas about the use of tourism data, analytics for business strategies, innovation, and growth. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see from the background, our graphic recorders have been noting the key points of this conference. This graphical summary will also be shared with you. The organizing team would like to thank all our presenters for taking the time to share their learnings and experience with other industry members. And of course, a big thank you to all of you, our audience who have participated actively today. Now, we look forward to your sharing at next year's Tourism Data Leadership Conference. Now, we've come to the end of today's program. Before you go, please complete the survey form. You can access the survey form from the link on the platform or use the QR code on the screen later. Please take a moment to let us know how we did. Now, after the event, we will be sharing details via email on how to download the materials and view the recording. With that, once again, a big thank you and have a great week ahead.